Chapter 2. Watching the Gate.
There had been murmurs and rumors all over the mansion for the last day. Tricia spent most of her time in the room that Taylor and her had shared the first time they were here. She was able to look out the window to the front drive. Every noise that went by, she looked up with all hope in her heart that Taylor would pull into the large drive. But he did not come. She took a quick shower and was standing back in the room, by the window, in just a moment. A light knock came at the door. "Yes?" Tricia asked. "Ashley asked if we could all come down to the kitchen," Thorane asked. "I'm sure you can skip it, and I can fill you in after," Thorane offered hopefully. "No, let me get dressed. I'll be down in a minute," Tricia replied. She pulled on a shirt that she had pulled from a bag that had Taylor's clothes in it. She longed for his smell, his touch, any feel of him at all. She pulled on some jeans and padded barefoot down the stairs to the kitchen. She was pulling her hair back in a ponytail as she walked in. Everybody looked up, a bit surprised that she had come down. Ashley got up and gave her a hug, and then they sat next to each other. Someone handed Tricia a very welcomed cup of coffee. The warmth of the cup offered some comfort. Ashley cleared her throat and started to speak. "I wanted to get everyone together so we can all be on the same page on what we expect to happen." "I don't think any of us could even venture a guess on that," Nathan replied, a bit more sharply than he had intended. "I don't entirely agree with you, Nathan," Thorane replied, very calm and very cool. "So what do you think their next move will be?" Nathan asked. "I think they are already making it. The Nightshade was only a small group of who we were dealing with. If Renar is truly on top of this group, then logic would dictate that they are building their numbers to launch a first-wave assault on us. I'm sure that's to thin out our numbers. Then, if we make it through, we will face the smaller but much better trained army. And then..." Thorane was cut off. "Jesus! And more and then..." Nathan said. "Just one more," Thorane smiled. "We have to end Renar." "Oh, well, no biggie," Nathan said, dripping sarcasm. Amy laid a hand on Nathan's shoulder. "You would be surprised what we can pull off together," she assured. "Oh, believe me, I know. But there are limits," he said. "Amy is right," Ashley said, taking the conversation. "We knew this road would not be at all easy, but the reward is worth fighting for," Ashley stated. The leadership fit her, as it always had. She looked everyone in the room in the eyes. Some offered nods in support. "So if they are gearing up, we need to as well," one of the leaders in the room said. They spoke more of their plans, but in the end they would have to wait for the bloodlust vampires to make their first move. Taylor's absence was felt, and there was no getting around it. Tricia and Thorane tried to offer confident smiles and reassuring words, but without the wash of Taylor's power flowing around the house, it was hard to be confident. Tricia slipped out the front door and onto the porch. She watched the gate, hoping. Of course, to no avail. Amy came out and plopped down next to her. "You know, I'd loved Taylor for a long time. I mean, like in a romantic way," Amy sighed. Tricia cocked an eyebrow. "Don't worry, I gave it up a long time ago. But yeah, for a long time the sun rose and the moon set with Taylor. I never really told anyone," Amy said. Tricia sat quietly for a moment. "When he comes back, we could tell him," Tricia offered. The fear had set into her eyes. Amy smiled and reached out and hugged Tricia. "Honey, anyone can see that you and Taylor are meant to be together. If I stood in the middle of that, I'd probably get hit by lightning or some shit," Amy said with a laugh. "I just told you because since I've met him, I've watched Taylor closely. First as a love-struck girl, and then as a friend, and I think even now more as a sister. And I know he'll show up. Most likely just in time," Amy said with a chuckle. "I just don't know. I mean, I don't know him as long as you do, but it just doesn't seem like him." Tricia sighed, not without some relief. "Taylor has been by himself for a long time. He was such a happy kid." Thorane plopped down silently next to them. "Oh, sorry for interrupting," Thorane smiled. "And eavesdropping," Amy said with a stern voice, but her face carried a large smile. "It's okay, go on. I keep forgetting you've been around Taylor almost the longest. Tell me more about him," Tricia said with a smile on her face, for the first time in a while. Amy nodded and smiled. "Well, I do apologize for eavesdropping. I suppose I'll start at the beginning. I was never very good at living quietly, and some of the older vampires think I am reckless and young. Anyway, I had lived a pretty lively life. Lots of parties, lots of drinking, and some motorcycle jumps, he said with a twinkle in his eye. Well, they got together and they forced Taylor's dad to make me drop my identity and live quietly for 30 or 40 years, Thorant said with a grimace. So when they decided to go quietly to Utah, I figured I would go. Utah was one place I had never gone. So a couple of days before Taylor was born, I arrived in California, rented a car, and drove to Utah. That was one strange week. I met a werewolf that week, Thorant said. No shit? Amy said. No shit, replied Thorant. He was impressive, but then directly after I completed the drive to Salt Lake. And when I met Taylor, it was much more impressive. That wave or wash of warmth you feel when he comes around? The girls nodded. Well, he's always had that. He was a real cute kid, too, always with a big goofy grin on his face. Taylor's dad even said when he was 7 that I could go home and another vampire could come and watch. But to me, Taylor was like a little brother. A little brother meant for very big things, Thorant said. I couldn't go. I needed to make sure that he would be all right. I mean, there was a part of me that knew Taylor would be the spark that would ignite the war. I think his dad knew that too, and that's why they decided to fake their death. In the vampire society that I live in, I am one of the few that believes we should do something about the bloodlusters. So yes, they faked their deaths, but it was bad, and we knew it the second the plan had been carried out. He was destroyed. He cried for days for his dead parents, and I cried for him outside his door when I began to watch over him. It was relatively easy to provide the basics from the shadows, but he had been changed, and Yannicka, Taylor's mom, and Tanar, and I could see that he would never be the same. Scott and his mom were there for Taylor. However, the minute he moved in, he started helping keeping Scott in hand. I know Scott's mom was very happy to have Taylor with them, as he was able to handle Scott and helped with the load. When Scott's mom passed, it was as if it had never happened. If you saw Taylor, he did not react. I know he loved her, but there was not a tear. Scott became more imbalanced, and that's when he really hit the drugs. One night I actually followed Scott instead of Taylor. Taylor was just going to bed, and I had a bad feeling about Scott. He went and got high. In fact, too high, and most likely would have died. However, Taylor got a very strange phone call, telling him he'd better pick up his friend at... Anyway, Taylor came and got Scott to the hospital. He would have died that night if Taylor wouldn't have got him. A couple weeks later he met Tiffany, and things started to turn. Scott got himself under control. He certainly seemed to love everything about her, and he made great changes in himself to be with her. Taylor was happy for them, but when they moved in together, Taylor moved into his current place. Or the little hole, as I like to call it, Thorant said. Oh, no kidding, that apartment looks more like a used bookstore, Amy said. Tricia laughed. Well, there's always something to look at, and it's kind of cute, Tricia tried to defend. Amy busted out laughing. You're the one that's going to have to live there, girl, not me, Amy replied. Oh, no, we're going to need more space. She paused. And light. They all burst out laughing. Thorant regained himself and continued. He worked, he read, he worked, he read. Occasionally he went for a hike, or when Amy could convince him to go out. But most of the time he was a hermit. But he slowly started to come out. It seemed like the time was ready, so Tanar told me to offer him the chance to convert. I set up the fall off the waterfall. It made it look like a random event so Taylor could make his decision, unbiased. I don't think anyone liked the idea of Scott being converted, but everyone knew if we just offered Taylor the chance, he would not take it. Scott and him were in everything together as far as Taylor was concerned, back then. And the rest I believe you know. Thorant finished. You think he's gone away for good? Tricia asked. No, if anything, it's like Amy said. In the end, Taylor always comes to the right choice, Thorant replied. They all looked at the gate. Nothing.